Democratic Alliance leader John Steenhuisen says if all goes well, the ANC will be out of power next year. Steenhuisen says all the parties in the Moonshot Pact have enough support to oust the governing party. 7 political parties, including the DA, ActionSA, IFP and others, will meet next month to work out a common vision for a new government. The historic National Convention is set to take place at the 16th or on the 16th and 17th of August at the same venue where the Codesa negotiations were held. And joining us now in studio is ActionSA chairperson in the Eastern Cape region, Athol Trollip, who's going to speak to us about their plans to oust the ANC. Well, let's begin with what we've just come out of. In fact, let me do the unthinkable here, Athol. Ngibulise ngesixhosa vonini. Molo baba.
Molo mhlekazi kunjani?
Uza eGoli uza nekhephu, yintoni ingxaki yakho?
Asiniphethe ikhephu ngebomu. Sifuna nive ingqele esiqhelileyo pha kuthi ephondweni. Ingqele esiqhelileyo pha ayongqele njena yekhephu kodwa yokuhlupheka. Sihluphekile kakhulu eEastern Cape mhlekazi. Yiyo lento sifuna le coalition pact iqhubeke. Sikwazi ukumkhupha ukhongolose kurhulumente ngoba kudala siphethe kakubi pha ephondweni.
Well, perhaps let's pick up on exactly the point you've just made, that the intention of this Moonshot Pact is to see the back of the ANC because people in the Eastern Cape live in poverty and squalor. That Moonshot Pact, it comes next month. Firstly, how are you going to deal with it being possibly overshadowed by the BRICS summit, which is coming up?
Okay, Xoli, thanks very much. You will know that in 2018 I left politics for my own good reasons, and I was doing something that I really loved. I was working in agriculture with some commercial black citrus growers, and I was really loving it until Herman Mashaba called me one day, and he said, look, I want you to come and help me fix South Africa and fix the Eastern Cape. And after a long, long meeting, I said to Herman Mashaba, look, it sounds like a great idea. Good luck to you, but I've had enough. Yeah. And his response to me actually blew me away. He looked at me and said, have you done enough? And, I got onto the plane and I flew home and I thought about that question, and I got into my car and I drove home and I said to my wife, this is what this man asked me, have I done enough? And I live in the Eastern Cape. It's the worst run province. On almost any conceivable index, we come last. The ANC has the highest support in that province. And that I haven't done enough. Yeah. So I'm back in politics. So that's what brings me here. But I also think that another thing that's a reality in South Africa is that we've had one-party domination based on racial grounds for the past 80 years in South Africa. Almost 50 years under a white nationalist government. Almost 30 years under a black ANC government. And the diversity of our country means, I think, for the foreseeable future, that coalitions are going to be a part of government going forward. Also, politicians must understand you can't be colorblind in South African politics. You can't be blind to the lived realities of South Africans. Yeah. Poverty, crime, unemployment, lack of opportunities, lack of proper access to good education, and in many parts of the country, lack of access to basic services. Yeah. So here's the thing, Xoli. Most of the political parties in South Africa are either based or formed around a racial affiliation, historical racial affiliation, or they are parochial, they're focused on very parochial, narrow interests. They're either ethnic-based, or they're regionally-based parties, or they're religious-based parties. Almost like enclave politics. Right. And enclave politics looks after the interest of a narrow group of people. And that's not serving the interests of all South Africans. So I think that this pact discussion is something novel, it's new. I disagree with John Steenhuisen. We're not even close to having enough people in the pact to get us across the mark to become a government. We're going to have to extend the invitation to get enough people there, because I don't believe that you can shoot for the moon if you don't have a vessel that will take you to the moon, because you'll end up in the stars. So better you have a proper vessel with enough fuel and enough power to get you to where you want to go. You can't just say, oh, we're going to have a Moonshot Pact and we're going to have a new government when you don't have the numbers. Yeah. We need 50% plus one in a cooperating pact in order to get rid of this inept, corrupt government.
And these 7 parties that are involved, or at least expressed an interest in participating in the Moonshot Pact, there are 7 of them. You're saying that that is not enough to take you far to reach for the moon. So how many more political parties?
Look, first of all, I think that this invitation needs to be an open invitation, because once you become exclusive, especially in South Africa, there are always questions about why are you excluding me, why are you banning other political parties. So I think it needs to be an open invitation, and say to parties, we are going to go together to a convention and we're going to discuss some basic values and principles and also some governance programs. After that convention, you can decide whether you're in or out. If you exclude them from the outset, I think it's exclusionary, and it might drive some political parties that should be coalescing with us to go and coalesce with the ANC, for example.
When you say it's exclusionist, I suspect you're talking about the EFF, you're talking about the ANC. Are you saying that they too should be invited here?
No, absolutely not. The ANC must not be invited. The ANC have had their 30 years. They've messed up governance. I think South Africans are at idem now. You know, nowadays people don't argue that the ANC can still do it. They know they can't do it. People have come to the realization that the ANC is overwhelmed. And that's why I was interested today. I was at a breakfast with Mike Sham from State of the Nation. And he was saying that South Africans are renowned for perseverance. And he says he doesn't like that anymore. We shouldn't be persevering. And I said once, and it trended on TikTok, where I said,
right.
Because we're renowned to be able to take punishment and just take punishment. And we must stop persevering. We must say, okay, this is not good enough. Draw a line in the sand. Say, we want better education for our kids. We want trafficable roads. We want to be able to turn a switch on the wall and have electricity. We want South Africa to become a destination of international investment again, because people believe in us. People don't believe in South Africa. In foreign direct investment doesn't want to come to South Africa, even though there's massive opportunity on the African continent, because they don't know whether we can keep the lights on, whether we can have water in our taps, and whether the water that comes out of that taps is trustworthy. So we're at an all-time low, and we can turn that around, Xoli. I mean, I was part of an example in Nelson Mandela Bay, a small little example, but if I can use it, I'd like to use it.
Sure.
You know, I became the mayor, and, you know, I felt like the proverbial Jack Russell that had caught the bus, because I was now the bus driver.
Right.
And I thought to myself, how are we going to fix this thing? And I was very circumspect about the civil service that I had, because they were all ANC-appointed cadres in the civil service. And I thought they'd be very obstructive. But you know what the reality is? The civil service are middle class. They want everything that all South Africans want. They want their cities to work. They want their kids to have opportunities. They want access to good schools. And you know, I made them an offer. I said we'd run that city like train tracks. I'd keep the politics out of the administration on condition that the administration stayed out of the politics. And they responded magnificently. We went from being the second worst metro to the second best in 1 year.
So there are 2 issues about what you've said, Athol. And it's a mouthful. So let me start with the exclusionist tendencies in South African politics. At the moment, as I'm talking to you, the Democratic Alliance in the Western Cape is pushing for what is called the Provincial Powers Bill. You were once a member of this political party. Observers are saying that the Western Cape wants to be a federal government within the unitary state of South Africa, and there is big opposition against that. Do you support that bill, for starters?
Well, first of all, I'm not fully familiar with the bill because I don't live in the Western Cape, but I'm not scared of federalism. I really am not scared of federalism, because let's look at the Eastern Cape, for example, where I come from. The ANC governs the Eastern Cape with the largest majority, and as I said, they come last on every single imaginable index. So, you know, it's time to get rid of them and maybe get some other people from the Eastern Cape who have got the knowledge and the expertise and the passion to make it work. So I think federalism is not a bad policy. It works better in most countries than a unitary state. We have a constitution that makes provision for a unitary state. But also we have local governments that are devolved from national government. We've got IFP governments, we've got DA governments, we've got coalition governments, we've got ANC governments, all in a unitary state. There is provision for that. So I don't think there's a grave sin for the Western Cape to say we want to look after our own policing because we don't trust the police commissioner and the National Minister of Police. Who can trust him, Xoli? Look at the figures. Look at the crime statistics. We also want to run our own trains in the Western Cape because Fikile Mbalula and the Minister of Transport destroyed the train systems in the Western Cape. Who can blame them? Nobody can blame them.
So there's merit in the argument.
I think there is merit in the argument.
The other contradictory element I'd like to deal with is exactly what you say you experienced as mayor in Gqeberha. The civil service, they showed themselves to be people who are eager and equal to the task at hand. The DA mayor in Tshwane, the capital city of South Africa, seems to be suggesting that the civil service there are a bunch of people. He won't mention a political party in which they belong, but he says that they are a bunch of saboteurs who are only interested in furthering the status quo, and that is the looting and just general mismanagement within the municipality. How can there be so much difference when a new government comes into being? It has a different face from the face of the ANC. That's what Tshwane effectively is to what you once got into in the Eastern Cape.
Okay, so there's one small fundamental difference.
Right.
Tshwane has been governed by the DA or DA-led coalitions for a number of years now. It's not a new government.
Sure.
So Leers Brink might be the new mayor, but it's not a new government. It's been there for a long, long time.
Coalition.
Yeah, coalition. When I became the mayor, also a coalition, under my leadership, we went from being the worst performing municipality to the metro municipality to the second best in 1 year. Now that was an achievement that couldn't be done just with politicians. It had to be done with civil servants. So I don't know why they can't get that right in Tshwane. But everything's about attitude, how you fix things. And I think that if you appeal to what's best about South Africans and not what's worst about South Africans, you can get things right. But there's another fact. Cadre deployment has been proven to be a fact, despite some denial previously by the President and various other people in the ANC. Cadre deployment is a policy of the ANC to put its own people into positions, whether they are competent, capable or not, to do the job. Just go and put the people in the job so that we can tell them what to do. That does undermine the competence of the civil servant. And I believe that even the civil service is sick and tired of having politicians breathing down their neck and telling them what to do with contracts and how to shuffle them this way or that way. Civil servants are professional people, and they want to be able to perform professionally. And I think if you create an environment where that can happen, we will see an immediate turnaround in our civil service and the efficacy of our public service.
So there's a position here by ActionSA that you are going to participate in the Moonshot Pact, which is an idea of the DA leader, but you will not participate in discussions with the Deputy President of South Africa, Paul Mashatile, who says he's trying to rally political parties who obviously have a stake in the coalition-run governments that we are seeing are falling apart. Why won't you attend those discussions?
Because, frankly, it's too late, and Paul Mashatile has no credibility in that regard. If I can go back to my own personal experience, I think it's important to give context. In Nelson Mandela Bay, you know, the EFF woke up one morning and they said they were going to cut the throat of whiteness and get rid of me as the mayor. Followed, they were going to get rid of Herman and then get rid of Xoli Mngambi. That was their plan, despite having gone into a co-government agreement with us as a political party. They tried 6 times. Not alone, with the ANC, with the UDM and various other political parties. They couldn't get it right. The day I was removed as the mayor was when one DA councillor folded their arms and they abstained from voting. Then that coalition of the ANC and the EFF and UDM and various others removed the coalition government of which I was the mayor. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the ANC has got no credibility in saying they want to cooperate with people to make things work. Yeah. Because things were working in Nelson Mandela Bay. Not because I say so, because we were starting to get additional windfall funding from other municipalities that weren't spending their money, and it was ANC governments that were sending that money to us so we could provide services. the indexes were going in the right direction. So here's the thing. When the ANC finds itself out of government, what it does is it takes dirty dollars from a sofa in Palapala, sends it in the boot of a motor car in brown envelopes to Nelson Mandela Bay and other municipalities, Johannesburg and Tshwane, to buy off councillors so that they can get their grubby hands back onto the public purse. That is why we cannot negotiate with Paul Mashatile or anybody in the ANC. Herman Mashaba is on record saying you can't fix something with the very people that broke that thing.
Would the EFF be a constructive partner in this Moonshot Pact if they expressed an interest in participating?
Well, you know, I have to be consistent in saying if we look at a track record of Paul Mashatile and the ANC, they have no credibility. The EFF have no credibility on any kind of consistency. They're the ultimate flip-floppers. They flip-flop from one thing to the next. I don't think they'd make a coalition partner for anybody, and certainly not for ActionSA. They are not reliable. They change their mind like the wind, and you cannot work with people like that.
Does Herman Mashaba carry the same view?
I think he does. He was at the breakfast this morning, and he said that, if I can quote him, he does mix his metaphors every now and again. He said that when he was called the EFF mayor by the DA, that he and the EFF are like salt and water, quote unquote. Those were his words this morning at a breakfast.
Ethel, let's talk about the Eastern Cape. You've already gone to town explaining why that province seems to come last at every other issue in the country. What is ActionSA gaining traction? Are you getting a foothold in that province as we go to the elections?
You know, Claudia, once again I'm going to reflect on my own experience because I'm not going to talk about perceptions. I'm going to talk about my lived reality. You know, I was in my former party, the DA, for 38 years. I was part of growing its support in the Eastern Cape. I was the provincial leader for 16 years. By the time I left there was a DA councillor in every municipality in the Eastern Cape, including the former Transkei and the Ciskei. It was a very proud achievement for me. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I left that party, because I thought, why would you then remove your very first black leader when you have a less than good election? When Cyril Ramaphosa, at the height of his popularity, went back by 5.5%, Mmusi Maimane 1.3%, I believe that broke a lot of trust that I'd spent many years trying to build up. My experience has been in the last 18 months in ActionSA is that I was very surprised to launch our first branch in Ngcobo, in the middle of the former Transkei in a rural village. That was profound. It struck me. I expected Buffalo City, Nelson Mandela Bay maybe, and even Makanda, Grahamstown. Because I live in Port Alfred and I'd set myself the objective of working in those two metros with Grahamstown in the middle. That was my immediate attention. But we launched Ngcobo, followed by Ipizana. And now we're launching branches every single week across that province. From Matatiele to Sterkspruit to Tokastad, Buffalo City, Nelson Mandela Bay, in Kocha, in a DA-led municipality. 2 weeks ago, we launched 2 branches there on Saturday. So I've been astounded that in 16 months, South Africans in the Eastern Cape are looking at us as an alternative. You know why? I think we are easier to vote for, perhaps, than some other political parties, because, you know, here in this municipality, in Joburg, we've got 23% in Sandton, 22% in Soweto. We contested 6 municipalities in the last election. We're the 6th biggest party. In all 6 of those municipalities, the ANC is under 50%. There isn't this kind of mountain to climb to move from voting from the ANC to vote for ActionSA. We perceive to be a party that is representative of the demographics of South Africa, and Mashaba's got a good track record.
Who is your draw card for young people with the loss of people like Bongani Baloyi?
Yeah, look, it was unfortunate because Bongani was a shining star in our previous party where we were together, and he joined us and left for whatever reasons he had. But we don't rely on only one particular person in this party. I think it's foolhardy to do that. You need to have a diversity of leadership, and I think Herman Mashaba was very smart when he slowly tackled his political party's growth. First contest 6 municipalities, test the water, but even before that, there was a people's dialogue. We engaged with the people. We're now today launching a dialogue engagement with South Africans about what they expect from the pact. So I think Herman's been very clever in identifying our diversity of leadership to make sure that the leadership of this party is flat and not hierarchical. Because if it's hierarchical and it's like that, and even Herman Mashaba, I'm here today because Herman doesn't want to be the only voice speaking. I'm here today and I'm in Johannesburg because I'm part of negotiations, I'm part of the Moonshot Pact negotiations, because we don't want to have a titular situation where only one person speaks in the party, and if somebody gets knocked over by the bus, that's the end of the party. So we want a flat leadership with more and more leaders taking the weight in this party, making it representative of more and more people.
You still have not told me who is going to attract the youth vote in ActionSA, and add to that question whether or not the book saga has had a credibility element to your party.
So let me start with the first one. Xoli Mngambi is our youth representative. She's a very bright young lady. She's recently been elected as a councillor in Tshwane. We've got a youth forum in the Eastern Cape where we're electing youth representatives in every single region where we are participating. It's done as a collaboration between the mother party and the youth party. We are winning FET college SRC elections. I don't know if you've noticed. And that's young people doing it for themselves. And I think that that's critically important. Young people have to do it for themselves. Now, you know, the youth, I don't just talk about the youth as somebody that exists out there. When I was a leader of the previous political party, we won Fort Hare University under my leadership. We were the only province that had a young leaders leadership program, the Eastern Cape, under my leadership. I believe the youth are the future of this country. I've got a track record of collaborating with them, but I never presume to be able to be speaking on behalf of the youth. So if you want to hear from the youth what they're doing for themselves in ActionSA, I suggest you invite Xoli Mngambi to come and talk to you and tell you what she's doing.
I'm going to do that, but you've got to tell me whether the people of South Africa still believe in the ActionSA project, with a leader recently implicated in a very ugly book saga. Has that dented the credibility of your party?
I'm coming to that. You know, what's ugly about that book saga? Because Herman Mashaba was approached by an author before he even formed this political party, when he was the mayor of Johannesburg, to say, I'd like to write a book about you. Herman Mashaba said, be my guest. I think it's a good thing that South Africans can read about successful black South Africans that have made it against all odds. And Prince Mashele came back to him and said, look, I can't find a funder. Herman Mashaba signed a contract with Prince Mashele. It's there in writing. It's been given to the public. That said, I will pay you to write the book. The royalties come to me. Prince Mashele then went to the publisher, Jonathan Ball, and said it is unauthorized biography.
Who was going to be the recipient of royalties?
Herman Mashaba.
Okay.
Yeah, to get his money back.
Right.
He invested in his book, and he was going to get some money back. You can't just give somebody 12 million.
Isn't that spin? Are you not putting a spin?
No, I'm giving you this.
The understanding is that 12 million was a loan.
No, let me give you the story, Xoli, and then you can maybe ask if you're not sure. So there was the contract. Get the contract. I suggest you get the contract. Have a look at it. That was the contract. I'll pay for the book. Pay you. Pay your author. Pay your researchers. Then Prince Mashele peddled the book to Jonathan Ball and said it was unauthorized. At the same time, one of the researchers felt miffed because he hadn't been given the recognition as a researcher and a big contributor to the book. He then came and said, listen, it wasn't unauthorized. Mashaba knew what was in there. Mashaba's made it clear. He was given manuscripts and copy to make sure that it was factual. You can't have somebody just write stuff about you and not being factual. You've got to check. And then the book was published. Then the furore between the author and his researcher turned it sour. But here's the thing. It was a one-week story. 1 week story, it's gone. And what's happening? It's now being printed by another publisher, and it's going to fly off the shelves, because the one thing you must never do is ban something that people want to read. If you take it off the shelves, it's tantamount to banning. And the best thing about that whole book saga, in Afrikaans they say, dis die geluk by die ongeluk. It's the luck from the bad luck. Because what's going to happen is more and more South Africans are going to read that book, and they're going to see that under people like Herman Mashaba, we can have a different country, we can have different governments, we can have ethical leadership, we can have honest leadership. And I think that's the best thing that's going to come out of that book.
What's your election story that you're going to sell to the people of South Africa? And I'm saying this because you know, the ANC over many years has been selling the story of we govern for the people and put people first, but time and time again we see stories where leaders of the ANC seem to be putting themselves first. What's your selling point going to be? Is it going to be around the xenophobic tendencies of this party, which is something that your leader has had to carry?
Okay, first of all, let me just discuss the xenophobic tendencies, because I find that the most curious thing. Everyone's quiet about xenophobia now because all the political parties are now on the same bandwagon that Herman Mashaba was when he was the mayor of Johannesburg. He said we're not going to have buildings hijacked by foreigners, taking over the buildings, running parallel municipal services for their own benefit. So he said we're going to take these people out of these buildings, we're going to reclaim them, we're going to give them to the private sector, we're going to create social housing. Oh, everyone said it's xenophobic. Now, every single political party except the EFF has made it quite clear about illegal immigration. They're all anti-illegal immigration. And we in ActionSA are very clear. Herman Mashaba said this. Nobody liked the quote too often, but he said this country was built on the backs of migrants and immigrants, whether they were Indian, whether they were European, whether they were other African immigrants. This country has been built on their backs. And he has said anybody who is here legally is welcome to make a contribution. And if I can put it colloquially, even your kids or your family, when they come and visit you at Christmas, you want to know when they're going to arrive, how many people are coming with them, and when they're going to leave, because you've got a plan. You've got a plan for beds, you've got a plan for groceries, and you've got to know when they're going to leave, because it costs money to have visitors. Now, we're saying anybody who wants to come to this country to make a contribution through a legal channel is welcome. But if you want to come through the back window, through the burglar guards in the middle of the night, you're not welcome, and we don't want you here. So you must go back where you came from. And that's very simple. It's actually an international issue. It's a big international issue all over the world. Is illegal immigration is something that every single country is battling with. Some countries are building walls. Some countries are repatriating people. Some countries are changing their whole education system. Religious systems are changing. It is a big issue, and it's an issue that affects South Africans directly. If you listen to what the Minister of Home Affairs says, that there are 185 South African Zimbabweans on the ZEP permits that are their futures uncertain, but there are 15 million unregistered people in this country. 15 million. It's a problem.
How should we handle it?
I think we've got to be very strict about how we handle our borders and our sovereignty. You can go to any... I traveled in 2019, I traveled down the Limpopo border. It's as porous as you can get. Not only do elephants and wildlife come and go across those borders and destroy agricultural produce and everything, there are no fences, there are no patrols, there's nothing. People, you see them smuggling, carrying boxes of cigarettes on their backs. I've seen it all.
The fence was built recently.
Oh, a fence. What wasn't a fence? 40 million rand. I could have built that fence for 4 million rand. I was a farmer. I used to build fences all the time. So fences don't work. It's the ethos. It's how you value your own integrity. And we need to have a situation where we say, South Africa is a sovereign state. You're welcome to come here. You're welcome to trade here. But you've got to have papers. You've got to know who you are. Because here's the other thing. You know, our crime's going through the roof. And you take fingerprints. How often... People don't even report crime anymore because the police come, they dust for fingerprints. They can never find that person because 15 million people are in this country without fingerprints. So what are you doing? You're shooting in the dark.
So let's conclude the conversation on this note, Athol. You know, the EFF, you may like them, you may not like them, but they've built their reputation on things that they say, we are going to do this, and indeed, it is done. Former President Jacob Zuma couldn't finish his term in office because pay back the money became the slogan. How is it that in the Eastern Cape you have a premier who's being challenged by his boss, the president, to say, you are going to have the SIU investigate this whole matter of Fort Hare? That premier seems to be limping from one scandal to the next. What are you doing as an opposition?
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to know when the EFF are going to pay back the money that they stole from VBS Gorgos. That's a very important point, and I think we should start that chant wherever they are. But they've never started anything in government and never run anything in government. That's a fact. In the 10 years that they've been around, they've probably got to be the most mediocre political party in South Africa. They've been here for 10 years. They don't govern one municipality. They don't govern anything. They are selling pie in the sky. That's what they're doing. So let's go back to the Eastern Province. You see, that's a classic example. That's why it performed so poorly. Oscar Mabuyane supported Cyril Ramaphosa's re-election. So they chummied up during the conference and Cyril Ramaphosa got elected. Then Cyril Ramaphosa has to start doing things now about some people because we've been waiting. You know, he coined the phrase 9 wasted years. 6 wasted years under him now too. So now he's starting to do things. So he says, go and investigate these faux degrees. But it's not only him. It's he and his predecessor, and Xoli Mngambi as well. She's the minister in Ramaphosa's cabinet. Fort Hare is rotten. Fort Hare University used to be the iconic university of African leadership, not only in South Africa, in the whole continent. But now people are being murdered, people are being assassinated, and they're handing out phony degrees. So
30 seconds.
Now he goes to court to interdict his president from investigating him. Surely if you've got nothing to answer and your slate is clean, you say, bring it on. Sounds a bit like Jacob Zuma to me, who still wants his day in court 21 years later. Ababantu abafunu kupendula. They do not want to answer for what they've done.
Well, part of the duty is that you, as the opposition, hold them accountable. We're going to bring you back about that because I'm completely out of time.
I have done it. I'm on the record of challenging Oscar Mabuyane and Cyril Ramaphosa in the province about the faux degree matter. We even handed in a petition at the Bishu headquarters at his office on the 16th of June.
All right. Athol Trollip, let's leave the conversation there. I suspect I should have brought up Oscar Mabuyane much earlier. But that's how we're going to end this discussion on this Monday.